Hi, everyone. Today on Not Your Average CEO Lifeline, we are continuing our VA series. We have special guest Laura Renner with us. Laura, thank you so much for joining us. Can you tell our audience a little bit about yourself and how you got into this virtual assistant space?
Sure, yeah. Thanks for having me. So my company is called Freedom Makers Virtual Services. It started when I was originally doing recruiting for small businesses, and I was just meeting a lot of business owners who weren't ready to hire. They needed help, but they weren't ready to have an employee, but they still needed help. Meanwhile, I come from a military background, and I just knew that there were spouses who needed that flexible work and they just so it's kind of this untapped source of talent on the spouse side and this unmet need on the business owner side, and that's what led me to pivot and to launch into virtual assistant services.
Danielle, I'm sure you can very much relate. Can you tell Laura a little bit about VA USA and how you got to the space too?
Yeah, so just like you, Laura, our clients are the same. So they are sort of in that in-between gap space where they know that they need help and they know that they need assistance, but for a number of reasons, they may not want to hire an employee. It could be compliance, it could be budget reasons, it could just be sort of the stress of having to make someone's hours every week. And so, like you, we sort of fit that sweet spot. And I like that you're doing it and particularly supporting military spouses as well. That's terrific. So as you're working with new clients or potential new clients, I should say, what's the first piece of advice that you give to them when they're thinking about hiring a virtual assistant? So is there something that they should be prioritizing in their search? Where should they start?
Yeah, so a lot of our clients tend to be the solopreneur, the single practitioner type person, and so what we always advise is to make sure they're ready and willing to commit to train and to let go. Because with every business owner, it's their baby. But when you're doing everything as a solopreneur, that one being able to carve that time out to train someone, not train on how to do something, but train on how to do it the way you want it done, right? And to have that commitment to carve that time out, I think is a critical piece. So that's very, first step, in my opinion, around getting ready to do it. Because even if you're overwhelmed, but you're not ready, then hiring someone just adds to your overwhelm.
Yeah, I've often talked to prospective clients or just on our podcast about, there's a difference between needing to hire a virtual assistant and being ready to hire one. That is a distinction. Many people need one, but they're not necessarily ready yet. And I know that in our work, we talk a lot about, building trust between the client and the virtual assistant and how important that is. And so that comes into that sort of letting go. Place as well. When you
absolutely
think about, building trust and learning to let go, do you have some tips about how a client and a virtual assistant can ensure that trust and a strong relationship just from day one?
Yeah. So you cannot over communicate, right? So communicate. I heard someone say once, and I'm paraphrasing, but sometimes people will say, I can never hire because I'm a control freak or I'm a perfectionist and no one ever does it as good as I do it, right? Rightfully so, it's your baby kind of thing, right? But if you can communicate, this is how I want it done, then you can have that confidence and that trust to be able to let it go. So one, knowing yourself, knowing how you want to work and being able to communicate that to the people that you're hiring to support you. And the other is even things like setting up a regular meeting, whether it's weekly, multiple times a week, or every other week or something, where that meeting is scheduled so that it's a time to build that relationship via Zoom or video. And especially as a solopreneur, if you're running a mile a minute and you've got emails from your VA, waiting for you to respond to. Now's that carved out time to be able to communicate and get things done with your assistant. And finally, I'll say, set the groundwork for feedback right from the start. Like, this is how I'm going to share feedback. This is how I'm going to ask for feedback. So then it's not so awkward when you want to give feedback, right? You're like, and include it as part of the training plan, if you will. But, say like, this is how we're going to share feedback with each other right from the start. Then it makes it less awkward to bring up, hey, I want to talk to you about the way you did something that I wish you had done differently, right? So when you have that foundation, then it becomes easier to build that trust because you already have the foundation there.
So Laura, now I'm gonna play devil's advocate for our listeners, right? I know I have to be a communicator. I'm ready. I know I need a VA. What steps do you advise them to take? Do they write things down? What process do you suggest they go through in order to say, I'm ready to take on a VA? This is what I'm going to do.
Yeah. So I always say, like, what's the biggest thorn in your side or the biggest pebble in your shoe that, it's always on the back of your mind, but it just never gets off your to-do list. So just, take a week to capture the task that you don't want to do. Because I'll take a step back. An analogy I always give is if you think about cooking a meal and then cleaning up, doing the dishes, right? Let's say they both take 30 minutes. And for some people, they love cooking. For some people, they love cleaning. And so, but in both cases, they take 30 minutes. But if you love cooking, then you might actually have more energy after you've cooked, after you spent those 30 minutes cooking. But if you don't like cleaning, then you'll have less energy after you're done cleaning. But they both took 30 minutes, right? So as you're going through your task, like, think about what drains your energy or what gives you energy. What are the things that hang out on your to-do list because you don't want to do them? And start tracking those for a day or a week. And then that can start to form the tasks that you might be ready to let go of.
I really like that you use the word energy. We usually talk about pain, right? The pain points, the same thing.
Right.
I really like that you use the word energy because that is something that, when we like to do something, it's much easier. And that's where our strong suits lie. But you want to delegate things that don't. And where your energy goes is so important. So thank you for bringing that up. It's very, very important when learning to delegate and bringing someone on. I loved that analogy.
Yeah, and I'll add, like, sometimes people think, well, if I don't like doing it, why would someone else want to do it? But that gives them energy. They love organizing. They love, paying attention to the details or things like that you may not be good at or don't enjoy doing because you're focusing on your zone of genius, and which is where your business comes from, which, why you started your business, right? So
yeah, we recently elevated a couple of our supervisors, and I brought to their attention, this is an opportunity for you to tell me what you like to do and where there are areas for you to grow. And knowing my behavioral style, conflict is so low on my list. It is something I will avoid at all costs. It's not in my nature. And one of the supervisors said to me, I want to be a problem solver. This is something I love to do. I want to mitigate all conflict. And I'm like so shocked that someone would want to do this. I was like, you got it. It is yours.
Right? Love it.
Sold. And I could not believe it. So just asking, right? Asking your team can be so eye-opening to what they can do for you. And it can be surprising, really. Just ask.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I'll let you ask yourself too, like, how many of us really have stopped to think about what we do enjoy, what we don't enjoy, what we're good at, that kind of thing, what we want to do more of, right? So yeah, absolutely.
So when clients onboard, what do you suggest to make the process easier outside of meetings, right? Do you set certain expectations? What do you advise when beginning to onboard?
Yeah. So at Freedom Makers, what we look at is kind of like level of control or a level of delegation, right? And so we want them to tell us like how much do they want someone who's going to stay within the lines, do exactly what they ask, and how much of it is more like make your own judgment call to take care of this issue, right? And so we try and match with that. But to when they get going from a what's the word, technical standpoint, we want them to start thinking about what tools do you use that you're going to need to give your assistant access to? Like if you're going to have them doing your calendar or your email or things like that, they need access to be able to see it, right? So start thinking about, okay, what do I need to give them access to? How am I going to give them that access, like a password ball or create an account for them? Go ahead and create that account, things like that to get ready so that they can hit the ground running when you have identified them, right? And even things like if you're going to have them do your email, or a better example, do your calendar, and you don't like to do calls on Friday mornings because that's when you go to the gym or have your regular coffee meeting or something, having that written out so that you can start to train them, like this is my guidelines for scheduling, for managing my calendar, and things like that. And then what we do also is we facilitate a kickoff call where we make sure they cover things like, what is the default turnaround time you're looking for? And can the assistant meet that, right? And hopefully they've talked about that before. And if that's not, if you don't need a default time, how are you going to say this can take longer? How do you communicate that, right? The second thing is, what is your communication preference? Do you want to do email, text, phone, Slack, like so that the assistant can meet the business owner where they are as far as communicating, right? So we have them have those types of conversations around, should you meet, when would you meet, how do you want to communicate, what is the default turnaround time, things like that, to sort of set that foundation for this is how we're going to work together. And so that's our advice, is start thinking through those things so you can communicate them to your assistant.
Yeah. Laura, I have another thing I want to get your advice on for our audience along those lines. When we're talking about being open about communication, I think something that I see a lot of is that our business owners, prospects, potential clients, they have the fear of sort of this working in a shared economy service. So sharing a virtual assistant, basically. So I'm hiring a virtual assistant, Nicole, but Nicole's also working with 3 or 4 other clients. And I think that that's a very real concern and a fear. And generally what I will say to prospects about that is to think of our service like a shared economy service, just like Uber is a ride sharing service, for example. So if you want to hire an Uber to get around or purchase your own car to get around. And so if you want to hire an Uber, you can reasonably expect that you'll get a ride within a certain amount of time. You can do it on your phone. But you don't have a car in the garage that you can just on a whim jump out there and in 10 seconds be in your car and be off. And so we talk about that, like it's not having an employee in the office next to you or in the cubicle next to you. You are sharing it with another or sometimes several other clients, but you can reasonably expect that your needs are going to be met in a timely manner. What's your response to that? How does that come up for you in your work, and how do you help business owners sort of reduce that fear?
Yeah, that is a great analogy. I love that. And we do warn them too, like, hey, they are supporting other clients. They're not going to be, asking them, is my meeting in 15 minutes in person or on Zoom, is not a question that you might be able to ask a virtual assistant like you would someone sitting next to you, right? So we do try to make sure they understand that. So I think the Uber analogy is great. And just like the Uber analogy, right? Depending on how busy it is, you might have to wait. There have been times I've waited as long as 30 or 40 minutes when there's just not enough drivers around, with Uber, right? Like a major flight has come in at midnight, and so all of us are trying to get Ubers. There's just not enough drivers, kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
So you have to wait a little bit. But also, one of the things we try and and coach our clients through is having a system in place where you don't necessarily need to trigger the assistant into work. They know, okay, every Monday I'm going to log in and take care of X, Y, and Z. Every Tuesday I'm going to log in and take care of A, B, and C. And in between those two times, my client is going to take care of D, E, and F, right? And so if you have this sort of system, this workflow that in a task management system or something where it's like, I know I'm going to take care of these things on this day or this time, then it becomes less time sensitive. So it's almost like scheduling your Uber. And so you have more confidence that the Uber will show up at that time, knowing that they also have that freedom to just not show up, right? But you have that, continuing with the Uber analogy, you can schedule it and you know they're going to show up, right? So it's kind of that thing of the more systematized your tasks can be, the less sort of time reliant it becomes to use your assistant, if that makes sense.
Oh, it certainly does. Process for me, I'm the process, right? So I relate to that a great deal. And with us training our VAs to know process and to recognize it and to talk to your client about process really will help as well. So
that's a great point. Yeah, especially like us in the military spouse community, they're used to whatever you need, I'll take care of it. And so we try to train them to, like, train your client on, I will take care of it. And, how about we set it up this way for me to take care of it rather than I'll drop everything to take care of it kind of thing.
Yeah, and that's hard. I was that way for a very long time. And I talked to our VAs about it, that you need to have some kind of balance or you're going to burn out. If you're saying, yes, I'm going to say, 30 minutes, sure, I'll do it right now. Yes, you might be making the client happy, but you're training them to expect it. It's not reasonable expectations, and burnout is going to happen, and you don't want that to happen on either side, right? Your side, the client side. It's not this happy medium. So
absolutely.
Yeah. So can you tell us, Laura, where you foresee the VA industry going in the next 5 years?
Oh, I think, I think I think virtual support is here for the long term, right? Like, people now appreciate and understand how working virtually, remotely can work, right? I think, the buzz, everyone's talking about AI. I once heard a client say, AI gets me to 90%, my Freedom Maker gets me to 100. So I do see the VAs becoming more around chatbot managers or chatbot installers or implementers, and even kind of, I guess the term is prompt engineer, right? Like using AI to make them more efficient, to support their client, to double check the work, right? Do that human touch from the AI. I think that will become a big part of where the virtual assistant world goes. At the same time, I don't think you can ever lose that human touch. So I think that will become even more important as we become more reliant on technology. And so I think VAs that can adapt to that will thrive. And I think that's where the space will go toward.
I agree. I definitely agree. We were just talking to Leanne. She's the co-founder of 2XU, and she said the same thing. And this is the alignment, right? Danielle and I suspected, but we don't get to talk to many people in the industry all the time. So it's nice that even though we've been separate, we all have seen the same thing, right? Yes, AI is here, but it can't take out that human factor. It can't take out the customer service that is specific to not just answering a question like a chatbot. And that's what people are going to crave. The more that there's chatbot, you want to talk to someone, you want to have that connection.
Right.
So Danielle, do you agree that this is what the industry has been talking about?
Yes. And just about everyone I talk to in the industry has something to say about it. But along with what you said, I liked how you said a prompt engineer or an integrator, especially integrating AI. So it's just like you would use email. When email came out, and people
Right.
used to be doing, interoffice memos and printing stuff or faxing it. And that hasn't taken away assistance or support roles at all, but it certainly made them more efficient as well. You
Right.
can certainly send an
Yeah.
email much quicker than you can send a letter, send a fax.
Right.
And so I think that, in my opinion, I think that's how AI will evolve. It will be a tool that we use, just like we might use, for example, when we track our time for tasks, we're not tracking it with like a stopwatch, we're tracking it on a computer program. And so
Right.
that's just a tool that we use to track time. And so I think AI, ChatGPT
Exactly.
will be a tool that we use to maybe make things more efficient or faster, but it won't replace or, replicate.
Exactly. I heard a story an attorney shared a while ago where when he had, I can't remember where he was in the firm as far as how long he had been there, but a senior person was complaining about how, when he was younger and new attorneys joined, they charged $100 an hour, but now new attorneys can charge $400 an hour or something like that. And the attorney relaying the story said, yeah, but now you used to have to go down to the law library and pull out the books, and it would take you an hour to do research to write a response to a client that takes me 15 minutes because I just go to the tool now that's online and I can search, right? So he's now more efficient. He's doing what used to take an hour in 15 minutes. So it makes sense that he can charge what he can charge, right? But also, that doesn't, just because that law library went online doesn't mean I can do it, right? Like, you still need an expert to take care of it, to interpret what is in the library, right? And so I think you're spot on, Danielle. Like, the tool piece is what it is. It's not a replacement, it's a tool.
Yeah, absolutely.
Danielle, do you have any last minute questions for Laura before we ask her our Not Your Average CEO question?
Yeah, I would love to just, I know you were talking about, where the industry is going to go and in 5 years, and we talked about AI a little bit, but aside from the AI aspect of it, what are your thoughts about how the industry is going to grow? Do you think that remote work will continue, that there will be more and more, entrepreneurs looking for assistance? I think something that we've seen that's been pretty interesting is we have a lot of prospective clients now that are hiring us that are larger companies. And so typically in the past, they would have hired employees in-house, and they're choosing to hire virtual assistants. And then Nicole and I have both found that really interesting, and we're sort of diving into that. But I'd love just to hear, if you have any other thoughts before Nicole shares that final question.
Yeah, I think so. I think you're spot on. I think also as COVID fades as far as in memory, but we saw a lot of people, there was a jump in people starting businesses during COVID, right? And I feel like that will continue as people recognize that they want to design their life, and they can do that by running their own business. And so I think entrepreneurship will continue to grow, and then because everyone knows about remote work now, I think they will continue to hire support. And to your point, the whole fractional support has grown in popularity as well, and that is included in the admin side. So I do think it will continue to grow as far as not even business owners looking for support, but people wanting to provide that support. Like, I can work from home flexibly, doing stuff that I love to do. And so I think it's a win-win that definitely will continue to grow.
We just did a 360 feedback for the year, and 92% of our employees, the number one feature for them, for our company, was flexibility. So it definitely makes sense. And it's why I got into this space in the first place. I didn't want to
Many
travel
years
back.
ago.
Yeah, many years ago, I didn't want to travel back and forth to Manhattan on the train all the time. It was ridiculous. I
Yep.
wanted that flexibility to work when I had decided I wanted to have kids. So it's definitely a highlight to what people are looking for from working and having a family life. So
Yes, we hear that in our in work people as well.
yeah. So Laura, our podcast is titled Not Your Average CEO Lifeline. Can you tell us what being not your average CEO means to you?
For me, it means to always be learning. And so one of our guiding principles is strive for excellence. And the whole idea is you can never achieve excellence because once you do, it's now your standard. So you can only just continue to grow. And I think as I've navigated running a business, growing a business, I can only do that if I continue to learn and improve myself. And so that's been, I hope, what makes me not an average CEO, or well, hopefully every CEO is learning, right? But and just
But I don't think
recognizing
anyone's
that.
ever answered that saying like to
Oh,
always be learning. Nicole, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that's the first we've heard that in the many podcasts we've done.
Yeah. I would know it because I still go to school. I'm a lifelong student, so I would definitely have resonated with me. So no, in almost 100 episodes, no one's brought that one up.
Oh, I feel special.
But that's so
yeah,
true. I just never thought of it like that. But you're right. I mean, especially there's so much to learn and to grow, and so many ways you can do that. And we were talking about technology, and there's so many ways you can do that more easily today. So that's true.
Yeah, and even just like if you're always learning about yourself, going back, what we were talking about earlier, like the more you learn about yourself, then the better you can hire people to complement you, the better you can make decisions, like know what your North Star is for your business. So if you're not learning about yourself or just in general, then how can you know where your North Star is as you navigate the challenges of your business and the opportunities?
Well, thank you, Laura, for joining us. Can you tell our audience where they can find more about you?
Yeah, sure. Our website is www.freedom-makers.com. And there's information on there, how to get in touch with us. We actually have a task audit for people who want ideas on what they can delegate. And so there's hopefully lots of good information on the website, but they can definitely find us there.
Well, thank you, Laura, for giving us and collaborating with us in the virtual assistant space. It was wonderful to talk to you.
Same here. Thanks for having me.